Right, Eanes families, thank you for being here. I'm Heidi Sauer. I'm the Director of Counseling for Eanes. And we have with us Melissa Gaithright from Austin Anxiety and OCD Specialists. And I will let her introduce herself and do the presentation. And Melissa, throughout this, I'll also be continuing to let in guests as they pop in.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so like she said, my name's Melissa Gaithright. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I've been working in the Austin area for about 11 years with children and families, lots of different roles. I've been with Austin Anxiety and OCD for about I guess just hit 2 years this last week. And before that, I worked in community mental health at Austin Child Guidance Center, which some of you may have heard of. They've been around for like 70 years. Today, we're going to be talking about just kind of general about what anxiety is, how it manifests, and then also some ideas for caregivers on helping, not hindering anxious children. I've made this kind of a broad one, not necessarily about elementary or teenagers, but kind of broad in general. So if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. I know we've got about, looks like 22 people in here. So if we do have questions, we might want to hold them till the end. But if you want to have a question in the chat, that would be great. I am going to give us a little bit of time at the end. We're going to go for about 25 minutes just in the presentation, and then I'm going to give about 5 to 10, 15 minutes for questions. So glad you're here. Thanks for coming. So our agenda for today is kind of what is anxiety, and these are some questions that will be answered. How does anxiety impact kids and teens? Effective treatments for anxiety disorders. And what about parental response? So kind of what does it look like for caregivers and parents to respond to their child's anxiety? Some resources and questions and answer time. So what is anxiety? Anxiety is a very common emotion. Pretty much everybody, experiences anxiety at some point. It's not necessarily clinical levels, but every day we sometimes have anxiety, whether we're in traffic and we're trying to get somewhere, or even just hearing, a buzzer or a timer go off kind of gives us that instant anxiety kind of feeling to make us make a decision. Anxiety is a good emotion to have. And, it can feel like sometimes nervous energy, feeling on edge or restless. Sometimes it can make it difficult for us to concentrate or calm our mind. I know a lot of people get anxiety at bedtime, just trying to slow their mind down from the day. And it can lead to like sleep disturbance, like falling asleep, staying asleep can be really difficult. And you can have like frequent worries. And somatic complaints, which are things like headaches or stomach aches or even nausea and vomiting. And, it becomes problematic when it's interfering with your quality of life, when you can't complete some tasks, or for kids, like their academics are kind of not where they were, or it's difficult for them to socialize. What are the different types of anxiety disorders? Most common is generalized anxiety disorder for children and adults. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of every single disorder here because that would take a lot of time, but panic disorder, which often has panic attacks, where, people feel a lot of those somatic complaints very intensely, like chest pain or tightness, they can't breathe. And it can be triggered by different things. Social anxiety or social phobia. So the picture of that little boy kind of clinging to the parent there definitely reminds me of kids that sometimes have pretty intense social anxiety. Specific phobia, that can be anything. That can be bugs, that can be elevators, that can be pretty much anything that you can think of. So they do a lot of avoidance of places or situations that might have that. They might even look like they're panicking when they're around those situations. Agoraphobia, which is like the inability to kind of leave your house or be around groups of people, not necessarily because you're socially anxious, like you're worried about being embarrassed or anything. And then there's obsessive compulsive related disorders as well. So that might look like, OCD. So that's where you have an obsession and then you have to do a ritual or a safety behavior in order to feel kind of calm or safe again. And then there are disorders underneath OCD that are kind of related, meaning like some similar kind of thinking patterns, such as hoarding disorder, excoriation or skin picking, trichotillomania, which is hair pulling disorder, or body dysmorphic disorder, which is where they have kind of a delusional perception of their body. So they might think they look, like their nose is not the right shape, and they get very obsessive about that. They might do things to try to change the shape of their nose. There's also selective mutism, which is where it's kind of similar in some ways to social anxiety, but it can look like where you kind of can't speak in certain environments due to the level of anxiety that you have. And then I missed putting on here as well, separation anxiety, which I was really what that little boy is experiencing. So difficulty being away from caregivers, might have irrational fears about caregivers dying, or not coming home, or those kinds of things. Childhood anxiety disorders are very, very common, affecting about 1 in 8 children. The National Institute of Mental Health estimates about, between the ages of 13 and 18, about 25% at times will have an anxiety disorder during their lifetime. So it's pretty high. That's why I kind of like going through the list of disorders. So sometimes we don't always recognize what it might look like. Okay, so how can I tell if my child's anxiety is problematic? I get this question a lot being a therapist, usually in an intake, like, is this a problem? Is this not a problem? I thought that these are some helpful questions that caregivers can kind of ask themselves to see maybe if it is time to seek out some help. Is my child avoiding activities, socializing, or hobbies because of anxiety? Especially if you've seen a change. I know, like, after the pandemic, a lot of kids had some anxiety going back into school or doing things that they used to do just because it had been such a long time. The second question is my child's anxiety, or are my child's anxiety symptoms impacting their sleep, eating, or hygiene habits? So, are they unable to fall asleep because their mind is racing? Are they waking in the middle of the night to check on you to see if you're still in the house? Are they worried about a burglar excessively when there hasn't been a traumatic situation where burglars come in the house, but they're just really obsessed that they have to check the windows or they have to check the doors or something like that every day? Does my child have frequent somatic complaints that aren't explained by their pediatrician or a different doctor? Maybe you've taken to the GI doctor or a pediatrician or the neurologist for headaches, and they can't really figure out what's going on. There's not really something that's explained by that kind of medicine. Sometimes that can definitely be anxiety. And so these are kind of some questions that you can ask yourself to see, if you say yes to some of these or one of them, that might be kind of a hint to seek out some additional support or resources. Effective treatments for anxiety disorders. I'm not going to go into depth in these. I just don't have time to, but I'm happy to answer questions about any of them at the end. And cognitive behavioral therapy is usually kind of the first line of defense for anxiety disorders, depending on the child's age. Typically, age 8 or 9 and up. Play therapy typically is going to be for younger children until about age 8 or 9. CBT involves understanding our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors and how they're connected. And so just because children tend to be more emotional when they're younger and they don't have that thinking kind of brain yet, right around puberty, when that brain development starts to change around 8 or 9, is when CBT is an appropriate therapy. Exposure and response prevention. This can be great for treating things like phobias, OCD, social anxiety, and separation anxiety. So an exposure is something where you are exposed to the thing you're scared of. So like being alone. So a parent might leave their child in the living room while they go check the mail, rather than the child having to look out the window or follow the parent. And response prevention basically means not doing the safety behavior or ritual or compulsion. So again, not following them. And there's a lot I can go into about ERP if needed at the end. And acceptance and commitment therapy or ACT. And so a lot of that's going to be things that are going to be around values. Sometimes, there's some things for ACT that are okay for younger kids, but mostly my teenagers really like that kind of stuff, understanding how their behavior is impacting their values. Maybe they want to go to college, but their school avoidance is really intense, right? And so how can we get them to take values-based actions? Supportive parenting for anxious childhood emotions or SPACE. This is relatively newer in the last 20 years or so. I'm trained in this, and there's a couple other therapists at my office that are also trained in it. But it is a parent intervention without the child to decrease accommodation, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. Psychiatry, medications such as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and SNRIs, which are the norepinephrine, is what they impact. Sometimes those medications can be very helpful, like Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro. Those are usually the first line of defense when they start medications, but there are also as needed medications like propranolol, which is a beta blocker. So it can help with presentation anxiety. So if a child that's the only thing they get anxious about is presenting in front of others, an as needed medication might be appropriate. And then relaxation and mindfulness training can be very helpful, like teaching them some coping strategies to manage these feelings as they come up. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about parental response. So this would be kind of what caregivers and parents do. I'm going to start with the helpful thing. So helpful is going to be, sorry, I'm going to switch my screen here a little bit. Helpful is going to look like active, curious listening and support. I put some example statements here. And so maybe you can identify whether this is maybe how you might respond or not. It says, I can see this is difficult for you. Tell me a little bit about what's going on. So curiosity, rather than saying, I can tell that you are anxious, or, you're just being curious here. What do you need in this moment to help? Maybe they need a hug. Maybe they need a break. Maybe they need advice. I know a lot of times parents assume these things just because it's what we do. We want to fix a problem. We see a child suffering and we want to intervene. But being curious and asking actually what they need and helping them voice what they need. And then expressing confidence or support. I have confidence that you can manage these emotions, which you'll see is a very different than we look on the right side. So hindering can look like things like criticism, judgment, or impatience. So it says, this isn't that difficult to complete. Your sister was able to do this at your age. I don't have time to deal with this, right? Other things can be like, this is not that scary. There's nothing to be worried about here. Accommodation or overprotective parenting can look like, you don't have to do this today, sweetie. You don't have to do it. Kind of letting them out of the task they're supposed to complete. I can tell this is upsetting. I will do it for you. And hey, we've all done this, right? We've been really frustrated and we're just like, I'm just going to do it anyway, And then even things like talking about your child to others and saying things like, oh, he can't handle being anxious. I don't make him go to sleepaway camp. He can't handle that. So very much so, like kind of preempting anxiety can be overprotective. Okay. So what can parents say in anxious moments? I'm going to go through each of these a little bit in more detail. So the first one is going to be to reflecting back what you're hearing the child say or do. It's simple. It establishes a foundation for effective communication. It can be simple things like, you're really worried about this test today, or Maybe like, you really want me to say that you don't have to go to school today. If that's what, you can reflect what you're thinking their intent could be. If you're skeptical about maybe how important reflecting back is, pay attention to the next time you're struggling, and then take note of how the other person responds and what kind of communication you're receiving when you are struggling. And then tone and genuineness are very important in reflecting. If you're sounding sarcastic or forced, kids are really observant and they're going to pick up on that. But reflecting is a very helpful communication skill, not just in this environment, but really with anything. Just reflecting what you're hearing. I always think of like being a parent, and just repeating back what a child is saying can also be very helpful. Empathize. Empathizing with words and their body. Following that reflection, extend empathy through both words and body language. Whether it's a comforting touch, a hug, a supportive posture. Kind of like in the picture that's on the page, the parent is making eye contact sitting next to the child rather than standing looking at the child. This is a great way to kind of use your body to convey connection and compassion. Empathy does not mean that you have to agree with what your child or teen's perspective is, or even understand it. Okay, we can have empathy without fully understanding. It simply means that you believe that they're really struggling and that you feel for them in that struggle. Sometimes we feel like, as parents and caregivers, it can be hard to convey empathy when what their child is expressing is so kind of irrational or out of alignment with reality of the situation. I see this a lot with the disorders that I mentioned earlier. Like, let's say, like I'm working with a client now who has a bug phobia of specifically flying insects. And this child is 13 and will literally like scream, even with hearing the noise of a cicada. Now, for a lot of us, we'd be like, whoa, that's like really a really big reaction, even for just a noise, not even seeing the bug. We don't have to agree with the child's reaction or even validate that reaction or comment on it even. What we're doing with empathizing with our words and our body is validating that the child's experience, their feelings are valid there. And I'm sure there are times that you can relate to where you may have had kind of an irrational or big reaction to something that was not that big a deal. I know I have. The third step is being clear. Establishing clear boundaries is crucial when helping your child navigate their anxiety. Clearly communicate what you can and cannot do, maintaining consistency in your decisions. I cannot pick you up from school early. Regardless of how the child reacts or whatever they're doing, that is something that's a boundary for you. This clarity provides a sense of structure and reliability for the child. If they're asking to skip school, be consistent in how you respond to that. If some days you're like, you fold, right? Kind of that overprotective parent. And then some days you're very critical of them. And, that can be really frustrating for your child to not know kind of how you're going to show up for them. So consistency and kind of sticking to your word can be very, very important. Encouraging. I think this is one of, excuse me, my favorite steps here is we've got to be able to express belief that our child can cope with their emotions. And this is not just about anxiety. This is also about distress tolerance when things are difficult. Using affirmations such as, I know you can handle this, or I believe in your capabilities to instill confidence can also motivate them to face their anxious thoughts. We aren't saying things like, I know you can take the trash out and you can handle seeing a bug. We're just telling them they can handle that emotion, right? Because a lot of kids white knuckle it through their anxiety, like they push through. But we're letting them know that they can face those feelings in a way that will instill empowerment in them. Again, we're not going to do the task for them or let them out of the task because of their feelings. And of course, this isn't like a hard and fast rule, like always trying to make your kid anxious. Sometimes we do need a mental health day, sometimes we do need a break. But I think generally, empowering the child to manage these feelings is really important. Research has shown that parents who express to their children that they believe in their ability to cope instead of expressing concern about their ability to cope, that kids tend to have less anxiety over time. And there's kind of some ways to create encouraging statements, generally validating a feeling. So like, or acknowledging, which way we talked about a little bit earlier, something like, I can tell this is really difficult for you right now. And I know that, I have confidence that you can handle this right now as well. Okay. The last one is waiting it out. The final step involves allowing your child to experience and process their emotions without rushing to find quick relief or distraction or whatever it might be. By patiently waiting out the difficult emotions, you create space for your child to learn how to manage their anxiety in a healthy manner. This can feel counterintuitive in parenting, but allowing your child to have their own time and space to see that anxious emotions resolve without quick fixes is power and builds independence and coping. Sometimes, co-regulation, meaning coping with your child, taking deep breaths together, modeling, all those kinds of things, which I did skip modeling. But I think that, doing those things together can be really helpful, but it's so important to show your child that they can do these things independently of you as well. So that when they're at school or they're at college, they know they can cope with it pretty well. These are some resources. I have a very long list of resources that are books, podcasts, workbooks. I'll see if I can get those to the counselor here with Eanes and get that out to y'all if you would like it. I work at Austin Anxiety and OCD Specialists. We have 3 offices, Westlake, Round Rock, and we also offer virtual if it's appropriate for the client. That's our contact information. There are a lot of other mental health agencies in the area. There's a couple specialty offices. There's Capital OCD, and there's the Teen Child Study Center, and then there's it's a Texas Child Study Center, and Austin Child Guidance Center, which is actually where I used to work. It's a nonprofit here in Central Austin. And then I put a little information about space, especially since this is a caregiver guided conversation here. And so space is something that was developed out of Yale by Dr. Leibowitz. I did training with him. I offer space. There's a few other providers. And then there's a couple books here, Breaking Free from Childhood Anxiety. And so you guys can check those out. And then I also have my resource list. Hopefully I can get that to you. And I would like to kind of open up the floor now for questions. I know it was a lot of information I gave today.
Hi, my name is Shobila. How do we encourage kids to attend therapy? Like, it's oftentimes like we parents want to help them. We can, like, even it's like we are finding it's like a borderline whether they need a therapist or not. But still, how do we encourage them to go for therapy?
Yeah, I think one thing is like normalizing therapy just like another doctor. So sometimes calling us a feelings doctor can be helpful. I think I've seen it both ways. I've seen where parents just bring their child to therapy and it's pretty dysregulating for the child because they weren't really expecting to have to like leave school or go somewhere after school. And so I think having a conversation with your child, like, hey, do you know there are people out there that can kind of help with kind of the things that you're dealing with? You can even say, I did some research and I found somebody that might be able to help me help you a little bit better as well. But I think like feelings doctor seems to be one thing that, even though technically I'm not like a doctor, but explaining it in that way can be a way to help children realize like, oh, it's just like going to a doctor, but there might actually be fun things in the office. I also suggest too, like if you are going to seek out therapy, doing a quick consult call with whatever therapist that you're trying to seek out with can sometimes be helpful before doing an intake. And ask like, what are their ways to get children involved in therapy and see kind of navigate like how their reaction is. I I'm a very like child-friendly office. And so that makes it a little easier. Once kids see that there's like fidgets and toys and Legos and all that, they're easy to warm up. But I also personally, I do a parent-only intake. And so, meaning like my very first appointment is with parents only or caregivers only. And that way I don't introduce the child to somebody, you guys don't introduce the child to someone that may not be a good fit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Logistically, small children are good to influence and talk it through, especially when we are working with teens. It's quite different. Also, with their busy schedules, just want to kind of have an understanding of all these therapists. Are they generally available kind of like after school hours, weekends? Just trying to understand, give a broad
Yes.
overview of the schedule perspective.
Yes. So I think it really depends on the individual therapist on what their availability is. I know like I do not work weekends and my last appointment's at 5:30. So I don't work late into the evenings. Just because I personally have found that it's a little hard for me to keep those spots full. Because people want to go home and eat dinner and unwind. But a lot of us, like I think over half my appointments are after 3:30 because I do 3:30, 4:30, 5:30. Getting those appointments, sometimes, what I tell people too is sometimes you have to take a 1 p.m. for a month until that evening opens up. So I know that sometimes a hindrance is like, oh, I immediately want that 4:30 time slot because that's the ideal time slot. So that's kind of what I tell parents a lot of times is I offer those evening time slots kind of by seniority. So as soon as someone requests it, they get on my like list and then I offer it to them. So like my afternoons are not often put in for new patients. Occasionally, like I think I have a 3:30 randomly. I might right now, but Austin Child Guidance Center, they're gonna have sessions up at like 7 p.m. probably is the latest. ThriveWorks, I believe, does weekends. But yeah, sometimes it does take kind of hunting. And also if you're wanting to use insurance, all of those things play a little bit of a factor into it as well.
Thank you for answering. This helps us being prepared.
Absolutely.
Melissa, there was a question about insurance. Just curious if you accept insurance, and if so, are you or other therapists at your location accepting new patients?
That's a great question. So my office does not take any insurance. They will provide a super bill to where you can ask your insurance company for either reimbursement or it will likely go towards the out-of-network benefits. So if you have an out-of-network deductible, it will likely apply to that. I've had a mixed bag. I would say most of the time people do not get reimbursed. So I will say that. They just apply it to the deductible. And so there is a point sometimes if you've been in therapy for a year, for example, like, cause I also work with adults, but, where you might actually meet your deductible and get cash back then, which is nice, but I do not take insurance. We provide a super bill. All of that information is on our website. I believe Austin Child Guidance Center takes 10 to 12 insurances. They will also provide support for people who have been a victim of a crime, where you can get, I think, 10 to 12 free sessions. Psychologytoday.com, you can filter by insurance and it will tell you kind of where, what insurance, like what therapists, take insurance with that one. So if you click Blue Cross Blue Shield, it will only pull up therapists that take that insurance. I do have, I think, 3 openings right now I think one might be a 3:30, but I think the rest are during the day. But like I said, once one's open, if you are next in line, you would get it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Any other questions?
I have a quick question, and I might know the answer already, but do you have any advice for how to deal with siblings who don't have anxiety, but who may have a sister or brother who do? How do we help them handle that situation?
Yeah. Are you open to sharing a little bit about what the kiddo's anxiety is related to?
Well, we have a son who's on the autism spectrum and generally has ADHD and I would say maybe low level anxiety. And then he's got a younger sister who who, doesn't quite know how to handle it when he gets in that state. So other than just modeling it, which this is very helpful for us to understand how to model it, is there anything we can do in terms of talking to the younger sister about sort of what he's going through and what we're trying to do to help him?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think sometimes like just saying like exactly what you said, like, hey, sometimes it's really hard for them to regulate their emotions and control them. Like it's a little bit easier for you to do that, but it's a little bit more challenging. I think also telling children, maybe like the siblings, what their role is in those moments. So like in that time, it's mom and dad's time to intervene. This is what we need from you. Like, and then also I know sometimes when we have a child that maybe requires a little bit more attention than these siblings, making sure that you dedicate time to spending time with the siblings still, whether it's like one-on-one, go for a walk together or play Uno or something like that, like still giving them attention, because like I've seen a lot where in therapy they call it the identified patient. When the identified patient, the child that's having some emotional issues and problems, is getting more attention, the other children tend to act out or sometimes they withdraw because they realize, well, I'm better off if I'm by myself. I need to get out of the way. And so parents really still giving them that individualized attention is very, very important.
Yeah, that resonates pretty deeply. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. And I can give y'all my email. I think I can put it in in the chat. If you guys have questions or want to do a consult call. I won't necessarily like provide therapy via email or anything like that. But happy to touch base if you would like to. There you go. So it's just my last name at austinanxiety.com. If you're interested in services with us or anything like that, you can check out our website. There's a lot of other therapists as well who may actually have evening time. So if you're wanting an evening time slot, actually I accidentally sent that to Heidi instead of everybody. So
I can put it out there for everybody.
Okay.
Actually, it did come just to me.
It did come to you. I don't know how to turn it off of just to you. So it's fine.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Give you the option.
I have a question. So what I struggle with is with my child having anxiety and becoming overwhelmed with schoolwork and staying on top of those things. But then she's also a teenager. So I struggle with how do I deal with that when a lot of it I know has to do with her anxiety. But then there's also you don't tell me what to do, right?
Right. That kind of teenage defiance kind of thing. Is she at Westlake High School?
Yes.
Okay. Does she take a lot of advanced classes as well?
Not a lot, but she has a couple.
She has a couple. Okay. I also see teens, putting a lot of pressure on themselves that parents are not putting on them to do things perfectly or to get very good grades, kind of that perfectionism kind of stuff.
Right.
I don't know if your daughter experiences that at all, but I think there's the 3 H's. So if you see that your child's getting really frustrated, these can be kind of helpful. Do you want to be heard? So are they wanting to vent? Do you want a hug or do you want help? Advice. A lot of times parents come in hot with the advice. Let me fix it, right? And sometimes kids, especially my teens, they just want to be heard. Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they get to like scream at you, right? They got to do it in a calm way. But a lot of times they just want to express what's going on and that they're frustrated. And so the 3 H's are help, heard, or hug to comfort.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Melissa? Eanes families, I definitely appreciate you being here, and thank you to Melissa for sharing your expertise with us. And also thank you to Westlake school-based therapists, Katie Bryant and Brooke Anderson, who have put all of the sessions together for this whole week. You're welcome to stay on the Zoom for our final session, which is about parent and teen communication with community arts. Or you can, jump off. We'll just leave the Zoom open until that session starts. And we will also be posting presentations and video links later, probably next week or perhaps even the week after. It'll take a little while to get through all this stuff. But we thank you for attending and have a great day and a good weekend. Thanks again,
Thank you.
Melissa.
Yeah. Heidi, do you want me to email you that resource list? Okay.
Yes, that'd be great. You can email me, or
Okay.
if you're already in communication with Katie or Brooke, you can email them either way, or
Okay.
both of us, and we'll make sure that gets out.
Yeah, and I can send a copy of the slides if you'd like as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All
And
right.
you had a lot of thank yous in the chat.
Oh, that's great. All right,
Yeah.
y'all. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye. Welcome, Wanda. You're welcome to hang out for as long as you want. We do have, hi, I'm Heidi.
To
We
meet
do
you,
have this
Heidi.
set so that you are I'm sorry, what?
I just said nice to meet you.
Oh, good to meet you. We do have this set up so that if you wish to share slides, you have access to do so.
Cool.
Yeah, and then what we've been noticing is when guests put questions in the chat, you don't see them. It's just me who sees them. And so I can, hold those until the end or, offer them up throughout the session, whatever your preference is on that.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna say in between pauses, in between,
Sure.
you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I can kind of wait and see if there's a pause, and then, if there is, I can tell you that there's some questions. So far, people generally have been waiting until the end.
Okay, cool. I think I stopped shared. Okay, good. I think I shared for like a second and I was like, okay, I'll just
Yeah,
wait
it is still
for everyone.
sharing. We can see.
Okay. You can see.
I can see, yeah.
I see it. Stop share right there. It's
There we
interesting.
go.
Zoom has done some new configurations, and I'm
Now
like,
it's just your face.
now it's just my face. Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, and we
I know Zoom has made some changes. I don't spend as much time on Zoom as I used to, and so it's a little surprise sometimes.
there's all these like really fun things too. Like if I share, I think I could even have my head in front of my PowerPoint. I was trying to
Oh,
see
interesting.
there. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that just for fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
have not played around with all the new little features that it has.
Yeah, okay, look, I see Barbara, I see Deanna, Ana Maria, Kate, and PMH. We got Craven, Jennifer. And see if I know any of these guys, Elisa, Shoba. And if I say anyone's name wrong, please know that I apologize now. Yanhua, Annie, Giseline. I wonder if I said that right. Hopefully you're there. Julie, Joe, Shazia, Misty, Bahumika. Hopefully I said that. And then a phone number. I know I'm the second person on the last day. So I'm going to bring it no matter what, y'all. 5 people, 20 people, you get all of Wanda.
That's awesome. We look forward to that. It's been some really great sessions.
Yes.
I'll need to share some of these. I know my sister has a teenager and a preteen. So I know she would benefit from some parent-teen communication stuff. So
I'm just going to do some John Gottman emotion coaching.
oh,
And
that's good.
yeah, and also I know you guys are only, oh, look, somebody new is logging on. I see the side of their face. Kristen Shaw joined us. I'm going to be that like cool jazz radio MC person right now where everyone logs in for the next 5 minutes. Just I'm a parent of two people now. They're 30 and 27. And I always remember doing these. I actually really like talking to other parents that people enjoyed having, because I put in there kind of as a possibility for people to have a breakout for like 2 or 3 minutes with each other. Can you guys vote? Would you like to have a quick breakout? Because I'm going to ask some strategies and I'm going to have you guys talk to each other. So if you have the availability to do the reaction, do you know what I mean? And it could be like, yeah, I have a 2 minute, or you could give me a reaction like, no, with the thumbs down. I don't know if you guys know where the reaction is. Here, I'm going to give you a reaction right now. I'm going to give you like a heart. So you can see how that goes. The reactions now like all float. Look at this weird one.
That's interesting. We just got a message to you
Yes.
from Deanna Britton, who says she heard you interviewed on NPR regarding the mural project and comments that it was amazing and such important work.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a really magical project I did. For 3 minutes, I'll just talk about myself. I'm like, before I start, yeah, I'm a community artist and I have a group practice in Austin called Community Arts, but we believe in healing-centered engagement, which is kind of a different lens. People talk a lot about like trauma-informed, which is obviously great stuff. The problem with that is that it pathologizes people that they're traumatized, right? And if you go into a community, Uvalde doesn't want to be the school shooting city, right? They didn't choose that. Yes, they all have trauma, but they're more than that. And so, we really believe in the approach called healing-centered engagement, about like what's going right with them and bringing them together and knowing that they intuitively have the gifts and the strengths within them. So, yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Terry Ochoa worked on that with you, I believe.
Yeah, she sure did.
Yeah.
And she adopted a Chihuahua.
I'm not surprised.
There was a Chihuahua that had lived at a gravesite for like 5 years after its owners.
Oh, that's right. I remember seeing that on social media. Yeah.
Yes, that girl's wild. I love animals too, y'all. I'm an animal assisted counselor, so ain't no shade in that. So, okay, so we have very neutralness when I said, would you guys like a 2-minute breakout? Sometimes I just think and when I said healing-centered engagement, not that every parent of a teenager is traumatized. That's exactly kind. But you guys are each other's best resources. And so coming together and being like, this works, this doesn't work. So I had a moment, but if, everybody is driving, I have a sense that maybe this is on while people are working, right? That's kind of what I'm imagining, or having lunch
Definitely.
Yeah.
Multitasking.
Yes. So, but it's just really great to see people who are in the same exact boat as you are, right? Universally, it's hard to connect. And it was good that I kind of heard just like the last few minutes of your last presenter, because a lot of that same stuff is like moving away from being the problem solver to being the assistant. But we're going to be talking a little bit about like John Gottman and emotion coaching. And then they come back on. Nathan is joining. HUI. We. I'm wondering how to say your name. You're connecting to audio. Hi, Nathan. How we? I think that's how you say your name. I have the inner critic right now going, I'm saying names wrong. Okay, wait, let's see if I can do this. I'm kind of jazzed about this. Let's see if it happens.
It does.
Okay. Do you see my face in front? The problem is that it doesn't let me.
Kind of to the side.
Am I to the side? Do you see my presentation still?
See the presentation, but it's quite small.
Okay.
At least on my screen, it's
Yeah,
small.
we'll try it again. Okay, we got Maria in the house. Hi, Maria. BT's here. Mike Martin's here. Okay. Starting up for round 2, guys. Heidi, I'll let you start and then I'll just do the thing.
Yeah, of course. Eanes family's welcome. I know some of you have been holding on since the previous presentation and some of you just joined. This is our final presentation of the speaker series. And I have Wanda Montemayor with us from Community Arts, and she'll be able to tell you more about herself. And Wanda, I'll continue to let people in as they pop in.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. A little bit about me is that I love to share like some of these random facts. Let's see if I can do this normal. Here we go. It's the desktop. It's not showing my PowerPoint. Let's try this one more time. Zoom has changed, y'all. So I'm like, what are we doing here? Do you guys see my PowerPoint? Give me a thumbs up.
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. And I put my QR code here in case you guys want to find out more about me. So I am the group practice owner for Community Arts. We have art therapists that specialize in art therapy, but we do talk therapy, we do parent coaching. Our youngest client is 4, and there's no limit. We work with all the peoples. I have the wonderful gift of dyslexia and ADHD. I served 23 years in public education, all in middle school. In AISD, I was once at Fulmore, now Lively, and then I finished off my career at O. Henry. I started out as an art teacher and then worked my way up into an art therapist and a school counselor. And I have the privilege of having 2 humans in my life. So my oldest child is 30. And then I also got the privilege of becoming a step parent, and my stepdaughter is 27. So I know all the ins and outs of the different kinds of people in your life, being a step parent, having a biological child. They're all jobs. They're all our kids. And connecting with them gets harder and harder as we go. I don't know how many of you guys have like managed the emojis or the emotions, and I know Heidi's going to like pop questions in as they come. I know we have 30 minutes together. I'm like a time track keeper. Like I love keeping things going and the energy flowing. One of the biggest things that I like to really teach all the peoples, parents and kids, especially kids, about themselves is understanding their brain. Logic and talk will not happen if anyone's dysregulated. Part of my job is to make things not worse, right? We went, and we're all going to have fights. I'd say parent communication, but a little bit of it's going to be like how to avoid conflict. And when you do have conflict, how to like manage that. But number one thing is like understanding where your kid is at. So the analogy is that your house is your brain, and you can only be in one room at a time. And this came from Dan Siegel, The Whole Brain Child. And this is my very, very favorite thing to remind myself and everybody else is that the more activated you get, the more you go to downstairs. And with downstairs, that's that lizard brain, that's the amygdala. Upstairs, that's that frontal cortex, right? And this is really important information, especially to teachers and to parents, that if somebody comes into your classroom dysregulated, they're hungry, they're thirsty, they're angry, they're upset, they're not going to learn, right? Exactly. If your kid, how many of y'all, and this is where I love some reactions. I'm a woman that if I get hangry, all bets off. I love a snack. And the ADHD brain actually, yes, thank you. The ADHD brain thrives on protein. It is like the magic sauce. So the more and more activated we get, the more and more we're able to connect with others, to have empathy, to connect. Like, so if you are activated, and actually I love Gottman therapy. There's a bunch of approaches, but in Gottman therapy, you actually have couples have a pulsometer while they're talking to each other. Like they're really popular, and more casually now, everybody has an Apple Watch. If your heart rate is over 100, you're gone. You're downstairs. It's very hard to connect and think and have empathy for the person next to you. So imagine you come home from a hard day at work, Your kids have, the house is a wreck, the garbage isn't out, nobody started dinner, you're hangry, you're exhausted. Probably not a lot of magic is going to happen with communication, right? And so taking time and note, but sometimes it's like you're in a car, there's traffic. How are you going to get regulated? But the point is after your heart rate hits 100, really communication is super slowed down and you have to be very basic. So just even remembering that when you're an upstairs brain, there's no dysregulation. And I like to use a scale of 0 to 10. It's called the subjective units of distress scale. 0 means there's no distress in my body. And 10 is I'm losing my mind. I'm angry. Things are happening. I'm hangry, all of the above. So upstairs, you're able to think, you're able to connect, you're able to have empathy, you're able to play. Playfulness with your kids is so critical, guys. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. The more activated, the more that none of that's going to happen. So that's that bottom up regulation that we always have to remember. Even you as a parent, are you regulated? Do you need a snack? Do you need a hug, right? Before anything else happens. So like knowing your own personal physiological signs, and honestly, I love my Apple Watch. If it hits that 100 thing, it like spins and tells me to take a breath. It's like really gauging that physiological stuff. As soon as you start going down, I mean, these are just like some of your own personal symptoms, but I know sometimes it's just it's just like a part of the beast. Like you've got practice after school, you have all these things happening, you're chasing. So you need to know that your physiological signs are really important. And I don't know how many of you guys have noticed this. You know how it's a joke in our house. Don't yell at me when you're like, I'm not yelling. What are you talking about? I just talk loudly. Or, you're like, can you take out the garbage? Stop yelling. I mean, it's like all of that. It's like the perception of our teenagers think that, if we're sad, we're mad at them. Like if we hear like something that was really disappointing or sad and we might have a face, then they take it in as all the wrong information. But it really just starts with you. All communication, all of these things. So if any of these things are happening to you, really it's like take care of yourself before you try to interact and have empathy with others. We're just trying to have like some preventative medicine because, I know the term neuroplasticity is trending, but it's real. Okay, sometimes I have to have that up first. It's real. I'm going to tell you what Beetlejuice is in a second. It's, your kids' brains are growing at such a super duper fast rate, right? They're creating all of these highways. And that's why when something traumatic happens to a child, it actually has a longer lasting effect on them. Like, somebody mentioned that I did the project in Uvalde. Is that you can't wait is because their brains are growing. And if we have a rupture that's really traumatic at the beginning of the highway and we don't address it, then that's actually going to cause long-term effects like physiological, all of those things. We've all heard of the book, The Body Keeps Score, right? But in that same aspect, kids are so flexible. Like they can grow, they can heal, they have great response rate, right? They're growing at such an exponential rate. As adults, our job is to make sure that those highways, those early childhood highways, are filled with positive, loving experiences to counter any negative. So if we walk in the door and we're like super grouch pants, then everything else is going to fall. So you lead the direction on all communication. And so sometimes the other fun thing I say, it's not in a slide, but I think it's really important to know is that your teenager, their cookies baked in certain aspects. Their personality is going to be the same. Think about it. Think about your kids' personality when they were 3. Were they silly gooses? Were they grouchy in the morning? What are their personalities like? A high schooler, probably pretty much the same. Your child's personality is going to continue to be the same into adulthood. Their ethics by high school are baked. Really what we're trying to do is connect so that we keep them safe and that we have those loving experiences. Because I'm talking to, and some of you guys might have kids at different age ranges, but I'm speaking specifically to the teenage. So what is Beetlejuice? Beetlejuice obviously is the movie, so it's really great. This has been our term. The play was fantastic. Beetlejuice is our family's term for everyone stop, drop, and roll. So when you notice, and what we're talking about is communication and our relationships and the way we talk to our kids, but really it's a lot about like avoiding conflict because hard conversations happen. Like you need to do your homework. You got a bad grade at school, like all the things, our job is to help our kids become successful human beings, right? But part of that is we want to be able for them to resource us and talk to us when things are hard, and know that they feel safe talking to us. So part of that is prevention. So when you're in your downstairs brain, your kids in their downstairs brain, you know, and I suggest that everybody comes together and has a word. So Beetlejuice is our family word. If anyone in our household says Beetlejuice, that means that they get a break. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to come back and talk about the subject. That means you need to go get regulated. So I recommend that every family at dinner, you guys come together and you're like, what's the word that we're going to say that when we know we don't want to make things worse? Because we say things we don't mean when we're mad, right? We make like bad things get worse when we start arguing. I always like to say, who wins at an argument? Actually, 0 people win. Nobody loves arguing. Nobody loves fighting, right? We have to come out of that space and then we have to do repair. So if we can have a little bit of prevention, that's going to be magic. And this is actually based in like Gottman therapy of how like you have to go get regulated before you come back and you talk about the deep things. It also gives your kid power. So like, especially with multiple kids in the household, that if they're activated and they're going to say some stuff, they can Beetlejuice. They could say, I need a timeout. And again, a timeout, when you go take your time out, the important thing is that you're not perseverating on the conflict or the fight, you're regulating. You're like coloring, listening to music, dancing, whatever you do to regulate. Watching animal videos, that's kind of my favorite. You're going to go and you're going to co-regulate. But it's really important for everyone to know that everyone has power to have a break so things don't get worse. And again, that doesn't mean you're not going to talk about the hard thing. It just means you're going to take a time out, get regulated, and then you're going to come back and then you'll talk about it. But this has been one of the most helpful things in my household because now that they're adult women, but at the time we would just have some gnarly moments where everyone needed to take a breath, right? And saying, stop, I don't want to talk about it. Sometimes you don't hear that. That's why it's good to have like a code name, and ours was Beetlejuice. So anyone could always say Beetlejuice. These are those classic Gottman theory about, you know, Gottman therapy is actually based in research. I love it because it's really practical. They looked at marriages that lasted over 50 years and they were able to see like what worked and what didn't work. And one of the main things that they found, and this translates to teenagers, is conflict, because we're all going to have conflict. We're all going to have ass. We're all going to be like, dude, you didn't take out the garbage. I asked you 3 times, like, what's up? You know, and that's going to activate us. So how can you tell and how can you work on these things for yourself? And, you know, the 4 horsemen are criticism, right? Obviously, you never do anything right. I've asked you, how many times have you done this? Defensiveness. So defensiveness would be like, I asked you to take out the garbage. I'm going to choose the garbage analogy. I asked you to take out the garbage. Well, you never take out the garbage, right? Sister never takes out the garbage, right? Contempt, that's that like, and I'll tell you the biggest marriage killers are actually contempt and stonewalling. Contempt is when you look at your kid like they're, or anyone, or they look at you more honestly. I got a lot of contempt looks like, you piece, you know nothing. You're so dumb. Garbage. I'm taking out the garbage. So contempt is where you look at the other partner as if, or your kid as if they're bad, right? Or they've done something wrong. And there's anger with that. Stonewalling, that just simply means you ignore. You're like, you're not even worth my energy to come and talk to you. I'm just going to ignore you. So the antidote to these, and we're all like, I'm definitely like, my biggest one is actually defensiveness. When someone hasn't asked for me, then I feel very defensive about it. Really. And so what we want to do, and we are the models to our children about how we handle conflict is, and here's the other thing, parents are always responsible for the repair on conflict, even if it was your kid that like made the big, whatever you want to say, right? Even if the conflict was based on your child wrecking the house or having a crazy party, right? You're still going to have, but if you created the rupture, if you lost your cool, or if they lost their cool, you're responsible to show your child how to have a repair. And so here are the antidotes to criticisms. Instead of like coming out the door, I feel so angry because you never do, you know, you're lazy, you never take out the garbage. You have to be like, the gentle startup with the I language, like I'm feeling really overwhelmed because the garbage is still out, right? Defensiveness is you would be like, is taking responsibility, right? You just have to be like, I should have taken out the garbage, or I should have been clear about how I asked you to take out the garbage, right? So we always want to show our kids how to have those asks and how to do it correctly. Contempt, that one is, you've really got, that's those I languages too. And it's also, you have to really be soft with that, because contempt can also be like, how you give the stink eye. I mean, contempt can be like even the way you look. The biggest antidote to stonewalling besides self-soothing, and again, when you go and you take a break, is you can't think about the conflict. You just have to move into like regulating. But the other thing that's really helpful before you have to like, you feel like you're going to ignore your kid, or you're like, they took you to the limit and you're going to lose it, is you just want to be like, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm going to make things not worse, but I want you to know that I love you and we're going to come back and talk about this. I may not talk to you for a day. That way they know you're not abandoning them, and they know that you will talk to them. And you're like, I just need to have a little help. And by the way, if there's any questions about this, Heidi, you just pop in. So why I tell you this is that these are the 4 things I really want you to watch for when you do have asks with your kids, when you're talking to them in particular, because these are those things that are the most harmful. Okay. Or just some like little funny pictures. So what's your job? And I, developmentally, at this point in all of their lives, of all your kids' lives, is that peers are way more important than you, right? And so the little bit of precious time that you do have, you want for it to be in a connected way. And playfulness is always going to be the win. The more that you can take down that defensiveness and like come in a joyful, playful way, we found all the research shows that that's the magic. And I almost had a few slides in here about corrective behavior, because we don't want our kids to be knuckleheads, right? We don't want them to feel like they can use language, or that they can be aggressive, or that they can do some of these other things. So how do we have great communication while doing corrective behaviors with a high schooler? That's really hard. Heidi, is there a question?
I was just going to say, I wasn't sure if you were still intending to show slides, because there aren't any slides on the screen.
Really?
Yeah, it went off a couple minutes ago, so I just was letting you know that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's try this again. Do you see these slides?
Yes, they're
Okay.
back.
They're back. Thank you, Heidi. Well, just pictures the last one. So okay, good to know, good to know, good to know, Zoom. And I know we just have like 30 minutes. So I was trying to give you how to communicate with your teen light. And I heard this actually from your last speaker, is instead of problem solving, but that's the important goal, is that our goal is to move from being their emotional manager, them coming and problem solving, to being their assistant. And I know you guys already heard that, but it's like those open-ended questions. Do you want me to listen? Do you need feedback? Do you want a hug? I thought that was great, right? It's really hard, especially if you have a kid who has executive functioning, like ADHD. You're like, no, but I have to like manage everything. But at some point they will leave your house. So how are you able to like have that connection and have that relationship be okay, right? So just remembering like it, and we could give specific examples on how that looks oftentimes, but I think you guys did some of that in the last one, so I don't want to redo that. So the goal is connecting with your team and having these mini connected moments. And we already talked about like first step is knowing that you're regulated. Like, I don't know if you guys ever heard, well, mama happy, everyone happy. That could be like, when parent happy, everyone happy. It's really quite true. And then the next one is, how are we going to have that connected moment in everyone's busy schedule? And how are we going to have like this connected mini moment where there's like no agenda? It actually takes work. Connecting with your teenager like intentionally is almost like you got to put it in your agenda, right? And the other thing that's really, really important with teenagers is teaching them how to trust their gut, right? And And so I just want to spend a few minutes on this. And first is like having those connected mini moments. And how do you time that out? Playfulness is always going to win in the family, right? When you approach any situation lighthearted and playful, you open up the invitation. And we also know that that playful connected is actually the healing sauce for most people if they've had hard early childhood experiences, is having playful connection in their life. That is what heals them. Okay. So what are some examples of some connected mini moments? We do a real, and I have ADHD. I said that for anyone who came in. Mindfulness looks really different for people who have high energy, right? Like sitting in the moment and being quiet and being like, I'm going to listen to the sounds. I'm going to notice how this is. Doesn't always work. An easier way to say mindfulness is just putting all your attention in one area and being intentional about it. So my favorite mini moment that I have is I intentionally have taste tests because it actually is mindfulness and it's kind of fun. So we'll do taste tests on literally anything that I can find two of. So taste tests on face washes. Like I was like, which one do we like? And we'll just like all try it together. Apples, we'll take like 2 or 3 apples and we'll like just try it. It could be taste tests on pens, markers, it doesn't matter. The idea is you're putting all of your attention on one sensation and you're talking about it. And it could be silly. And that's all it is. It doesn't have to be scripted. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. But what it is we're going to take a moment together where we're going to put all of our intention on a sensation or a fun thing. And we're just going to talk about it. Believe it or not, we need those little tiny wins, right? Because when the big things come up, like, hey, my mom, like somebody asked me if I wanted to smoke, or someone asked me to hit their vape, or someone did all these things. If they know that you're a safe person and you continue to allow them to see that you're playful and that you're regulated, then you could go into those deeper things. And when everything is super tense and it's all about grades, then it's really hard to have that other stuff. So when I say be as playful and have these little silly mini moments, I mean it. And it could even be like a card game or anything that you can think of. But taste tests is one of my favorites because it's like simple, it's easy, and taste this sauce, taste this sauce. What do you like? You know, you're like having them engage or having them activate. The second one is noticing their feelings. Many of us have had dismissive parenting. And what I mean by dismissive parenting is, you know, I'll give you something to cry about when you're a kid, or no, you don't feel that way, or all of those things, right? Not all of us have had that, but what happens is when we shut our feelings down or we act like we don't trust our gut, is that we learn not to trust our gut. And really, we want our kids to trust their gut. So when a kid comes to you, or when you're in, and I don't know about you, but drive time was always the time that I had like a few minutes with my kid. I know a lot of your kids might be driving, but when they come and they share their day with you, and I don't know if this was covered, instead of problem solving, I want you just to mirror what you heard them say and how you imagine that made them feel. That magical combo shows I'm listening to you without judgment, and I bet that made you feel really scared. Now, the noticing their feelings, that's our whole goal, is you felt scared. And just having that empathetic moment with them really is the magic sauce. And many times I'll just have people practice that mirroring and noticing that feeling that comes up for them. So like an example would be your kid comes home and they're just telling you about their day and all their friend problems and how this happened and that happened. You don't want to say all the words exactly, and it takes practice, but you might say, I heard that today it was really hard for you. You had like 5 separate friend incidents today. I bet you feel exhausted. And just like, that's it. Boom. That continues to say, whatever you were feeling was what you're feeling. And especially for some feeling like someone who might have felt anger, I go, that must have made you feel exhausted and angry. It allows them to have those other emotions. So like just doing a little mirroring of what they tell you and noticing the feelings that come up for them will be so validating. And all of this is we're building upon this pyramid so that they will talk to you about the hard things, right? I was going to do a breakout. We have exactly 5 minutes. Because sometimes I think it's like really nice to connect. I was talking a little bit at the beginning about healing centered engagement, but I really want to know, what's the hardest thing about communicating with your team? Do they shut down? Do they have one of those 4 horsemen, right? Do they stonewall you? Are they afraid to share? And maybe what we do is we just have some people, if you want to share what's the hardest thing and just share with the whole group, that's cool. And then also what's right. All of you guys have moments that are great, right? Where do you find the best time, or how do you connect best with your team? Is it over a subject that you share in common? Is it in the car ride? You know, like having that communal sharing. And if you guys want to add this to the chat, maybe that's like a great way, because I also want for everyone to see what is the hardest, because everybody in here, I'm guessing universally, because it's a developmental stage, to push away from your parents. Like, that's appropriate. Yes, I'm seeing the chat lineup. So that's good. And then how do you overcome it? So if I were just to summarize what I'm trying to tell you guys today, is that you need to watch out for the 4 horsemen, right? You need to be able to mirror what your child says and then reflect their feeling. And then always throughout as much as you can, have playful mini moments, no matter what it is. No matter it is like, we're going to sing a song together, because the more playful and lighthearted you can be, defenses go down. And that's what we really want for our kids, is like their defenses to go down and to know that you're on their team, not as their manager, right? But just beside them. What are some of the comments, Heidi, that you're seeing?
Oops, I was talking on mute. So we had one parent comment that sometimes it just helps when it's really quiet. Another says the most difficult thing about communicating with my teen is timing. I try really hard not to ask too many questions right after school. He needs that decompression time. Sometimes we talk after dinner, but I don't want him to fear the dinner table either.
Yeah.
And then a third comment says that car rides are the best. Yeah. So car rides are the best. She has a junior and is absolutely fine with him not driving yet, just because they get the benefit of these car rides. He says maybe that's weird, but he doesn't really want to drive yet anyway. So
no, that's perfect. That's like the most important is for you guys like to share, because it is like, when do you capture it? How do you create that moment? And also it's okay for you to use a scaling number, because I don't know about how many of you is like, how's your day? Fine. So I have like emotion wheels. Give me an emotion word, or tell me the favorite thing, right? Or like, how hard was your day on a scale of 0 to 10? Or what was a great moment about your day, right? Having some of those little conversation starters that are more like, if you want the information 0 to 10, it's going to tell you they were a 7. If they were a 7, that lets you know that they're also in their downstairs brain, and rightfully so. I love a qualitative number, so I know where my kid is in their house. So if they tell me they're an 8, there's not a lot of talking that's going to go on. We're just going to listen to some music, and maybe I'll give them a snack, something like a nice juice. Believe it or not, adults love a little apple juice box too, right? There's something about that nurturing aspect, because they are still kids. They're still your kid. So I love that. I'm a drive time girl too. And I think
we've got
it's wise to know. Go ahead. I want to hear.
Sorry, there've been a few more comments. One parent mentions it's the best time, or excuse me, the best time for his family is really before bed, after dinner. He says, I try car rides, but asking them to get off their phone can make them mad. Then they're kind of shut down, which, yeah, I understand that. And then also another comment, it's hard not to talk too much when the introverted child is really quiet.
Yeah. So I'm loving that, because actually when you get your kid at the end of the day, their cup's probably empty. Y'all are spot on that, right? They've just had a full work day in their mind navigating social and academics. And I think it's okay just to be pleasant, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to, but if they're like, oh, mom, worst day ever. Dad, I can't handle this. Just being that listening ear on a scale of 0 to 10. Because what we want to teach our kids is to actually notice their body. Are they a 10? Like, teaching your kid to do a 0 to 10 is one of the most important things that you can do, because you're making them, instead of being like compartmentalizing and not thinking about it, they're like, oh, I'm at an 8. And when they say they're at an 8, then probably just quiet car ride is great, right? And that's what we've learned with trauma survivors, is not necessarily that overnight things get better, but how they report is that they understand their body. They understand that they're an 8. They understand that they're in their downstairs brain, and then they move into regulation, right? And so that's how we have to teach our kids, is to understand their body so that they can move into regulation. What else are you seeing?
We have a parent who is sharing that they do use a 1 to 10 scale, but they don't allow their child to use a number 7. Because to remove that number. And so instead it's an 8 is pretty good and a 6 is not so great. So it allows for a little more thoughtful response for her family.
That's funny.
And then another parent says that after school, she likes to tell her son about her own day, highlights, lowlights. And then by dinner time, he's usually ready to start sharing about his day.
Great
and that
example
also
of
allows
modeling.
him to get to know her and the family a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so if there's any big takeaways, is that every family system is different, and every personality. Like if you have a hard time being a silly goose, you're like, I don't do silly, or you're like, I'm nothing but silly. Whatever you do is going to be perfect because that's you, right? The more important thing is that you're like, we're going to have a 2-minute moment where I'm just like, hey, buddy, or whatever, right? And you'll find your groove. And I think the biggest groove is, just like I heard the last person, is not necessarily giving advice. Like we have to move away from advice giving at this point. The only thing you could do is help your child notice what they notice. It's like, notice what you notice, right? And if they want help, obviously give it to them, but don't assume they want your help. Awesome. I'm a timekeeper. I'm like, that was 30 minutes.
Does anyone else have questions or any comments for Wanda?
Yeah.
Some thank yous are coming in.
Awesome, guys.
Appreciation of confirmation that you're doing okay and validating some of the things that are going on.
Yeah. So steer away from the 4 horsemen and validate your kid and be silly if you can. And find the time. It's important to build those building blocks so the hard things will be there when they need it.
Good advice. We definitely appreciate you, Wanda.
And
taking the
Beetlejuice.
time.
Y'all need
Eames
Beetlejuice.
families.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. I've recognized many of these names from the week, so we appreciate you being willing to, tune in and learn some things about how to support your children and perhaps even yourselves. Thank all of you very much for your time, and a big thanks to Katie Bryant and Brooke Anderson, the social workers at Westlake High School. They put together the entire speaker series, so all credit goes to them for that. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Reach out anytime to Westlake Counseling or Eanes ISD counselors, and we're happy to support you. Thanks for being here, Wanda.
Yeah, of course. Thank
Have a great
you.
weekend.